What's up, everybody? My name is Jeffrey Gardner. Welcome back once again to another episode of Upset Alert. It is episode number 62 of the Ultimate College Football Podcast, celebrating all 130 teams in FBS. Now, of course, this season, this fall for college football, we are looking at just 76 total teams that will be playing FBS football in the fall. With that caveat, we are still here every single day, ranking every single team in college football, counting down from worst to first. So we've made our way all the way from the bottom of the barrel through the number 6 team in college football. Yesterday's episode was number 6, Florida, and previewing the Gators 2020 season. Hey, what's up, Caprilli in the chat? We're chatting some college football here, as always. And just as a reminder to everyone, if you want to join live on twitch.tv/robotbraineater, we will love to have you as a part of the conversation here. So feel free to chime in your predictions. Today, of course, we're not going to be talking about Florida again. We're going to be jumping to number 5, the Oklahoma Sooners, for the 2020 season, predicting each game on Oklahoma's schedule for this 2020 season and getting into kind of the breakdown of why we think they'll win some of those, why we'll think we'll lose. They might lose some of those. Of course, Oklahoma is coming from sitting pretty, right? This is a team that's been multiple times at this point to the college football playoff, hasn't really been able to get past that first round and move on to the national championship game yet to this point, though. So the big topic really for today's episode is, because I don't think anyone's doubting that Oklahoma is a great team this year or that they are once again the team to beat in the Big 12. The question is, can they turn that corner if they can get back to that college football playoff where they can get past their first round opponent? Are they going to be able to make it to a national championship game in this weirdest of college football seasons, or are they a team that's just going to get stuck in that rut once again? Of course, we'll take a look first back at their 2019, see where we're coming from a little bit. As I just mentioned, they were in the college football playoff last year, got put out by a very, very good and memorable LSU football team. So let's take a look back at this 2019 schedule for Oklahoma and see where they are coming from. You can see that line across the top of the screen for those of you watching on video. This was a 12-2 football team. It's a very impressive line right here. 8-1 in the conference, so just the one regular season loss. They were 6-0 undefeated at home. Just the one road loss, 4-1 there, and then 2-1 in neutral site action as well. Now, kicking things off last season, it was a win. It was against Houston for this Oklahoma football team, 49-31. So pretty good way to kick off the season there. They played FCS South Dakota, picked up a 70-14 win there. 48-14 win at UCLA. Of course, a 55-16 versus Texas Tech as they get into conference play here. And you'll notice they beat up on most of the Big 12, as they have for the last few seasons for the most part. 45-20 win at Kansas, a 34-27 win in the Red River shootout against the Texas Longhorns. 52-14 versus West Virginia. And then you get in here, October 26th, their lone Big 12 loss last season was by a touchdown in a shootout, 48-41 against Kansas State on the road there, excuse me. And then November 9th, moving right along here, 42-41, a close win versus Iowa State, a 34-31 win, a very close one at Baylor. That was one of the best games of the year in the Big 12 last year. 28-24 versus TCU, 34-16 at OK State in their regular season finale, and then another win against Baylor, 30-23 in that Big 12 championship game, before ultimately they moved on to the college football playoff in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, where they lost by a lot to LSU. LSU dropped a 60-piece, 63-28 in the first round of the college football playoff. So really, there's a lot of reason to speculate as we pull up the 2020 schedule here. We'll start taking a look at this. There's a lot of reason to speculate that Oklahoma could make their way right back to the college football playoff. And a lot of it for Oklahoma, as always, relies not just on the fact that they do tend to have a better defense, I think, than a lot of their Big 12 competition, but also on the fact that this offense is just on another level. Year in and year out, this offense is really just kind of sets the standard for what an elite level offense of a college football playoff contending type team looks like. So, taking a look back over the last few seasons, of course, we talk about it's almost you can pencil in the Oklahoma quarterback, whoever it may be, year to year, as a Heisman Trophy contender. You look back at Baker Mayfield, of course, won the Heisman. Kyler Murray followed him up with a Heisman win as well. Last year, you didn't get the win because Joe Burrow put out some ridiculous numbers at LSU in one of the best college football teams of all time. I would say one of the best college football seasons individually for Joe Burrow last year of all time as well. Um, so you look at Jalen Hurts though last year, he was a Heisman Trophy contender for the better part of the season as well. Put up some crazy numbers for the Sooners last year. I think this offense and this whole system that Lincoln Riley has running out in Norman, Oklahoma, really is just conducive to producing incredible numbers for big time quarterbacks. And big surprise, they've got another one waiting in the wings. Now, if you want to hear some non sexy numbers here, taking a look at Spencer Rattler's stat line from last season, this is kind of funny. This is what happens when you're backing up one of the elite quarterbacks in the country. Last season, Spencer Rattler played in 3 total games, threw 11 total passes. He was 7 for 11, completed 63.6% of those passes, did throw 1 touchdown in there. But you're talking about a guy who literally, as a freshman last year, threw 11 total passes in 3 total games played. That is that is the definition, I think, of what it's like to be a backup quarterback at Oklahoma, because they just like to run up the score, right? They leave their star in, they make sure that they get their crazy numbers and that they get their Heisman Trophy candidacy set in stone. It is interesting. It is it is certainly interesting to think about the fact that they will have a likely starter this year in Spencer Rattler, who has virtually no experience at the college football level, but is already getting the same kind of Heisman hype that Jalen Hurts was a year ago, that Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield were in the years prior. The reason, though, being, if you look back, because you say there's not a lot of experience to go off as far as his college football career, let's look back to when he was coming out of high school. Spencer Rattler was the nation's #1 pro quarterback for the class of 2019. Big surprise there, I know. Oklahoma getting the #1 pro style quarterback. This guy's got a cannon. He, as far as fundamentals, as far as kind of intangibles that you like to see in a future NFL type quarterback, he's got it all, just in the way that Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray did. I know those guys are a smaller frame than that traditional NFL quarterback, but they're still out there making the money that the NFL quarterbacks make, getting paid by the league. And ultimately, that's what's going to continue to draw these top tier quarterbacks to Oklahoma, because they know they can put up ridiculous numbers in this offense. They know they're going to get a chance to play for championships, and they know that they have a big fat check waiting for them at the end of the road. So, getting into this 2020 schedule with Spencer Rattler likely at the helm, looking at this Oklahoma Sooners team, the Big 12 this season is playing 9 conference games as they normally do. So all 9 other teams in the conference they will play, as we know, even though they're the Big 12, just 10 teams in the conference. So they play all 9 teams in the Big 12 that aren't themselves, of course, and they are playing 1 non-conference game as well. So Oklahoma has taken upon the very challenging task of playing Missouri State on September the 12th to kick off their regular season. Listen, it's a tough job, but somebody had to do it. Somebody had to take Missouri State, week one, and Oklahoma has volunteered as tribute here to put up about 80 or 90 points on FCS Missouri State in week one. That one, I won't even waste your time. That is 1-0 for the Sooners. They get a bye week. I kind of like this setup. A lot of Big 12 teams are doing this year. They have their non conference game week one, they have a bye week immediately after. It's almost like a just in case they have any kind of issues pop up in terms of the team's health before they get into conference play. They want to make sure they get everything sorted out, almost like it's scrimmage game in week one before they get into their conference play and the meat of their schedule. September the 26th, they host Kansas State in their Big 12 opener. This is a really interesting game to me, actually. For those of you that have been listening to the podcast for a while, um, you know that when we had a full 12 game schedule in mind at the time that I made my predictions for Kansas State, and I actually picked them to go 9-3 and finish as a top 25 team. I I'm not that high on Kansas State. I think I have cooled off a little on Kansas State, mostly because the difficulty of the Big 12 only schedule is there for them. But this is still a team that's not going to beat themselves. I just think the way the schedule lines up now is less favorable because back then I actually did pick Kansas State to beat Oklahoma, but I'm cooling off on that. I'm not gonna stick with that prediction here. I have given myself a little wiggle room to change some of these game to game predictions with the way that the schedules have been completely shaken up. I am going to pick the Sooners to win their Big 12 opener versus the Wildcats of K State there. It is a home game for Oklahoma. I just think with it being their Big 12 opener, which it was not previously, I think Oklahoma really will not be caught flat footed in this game. I just don't see it happening. So, Boomer Sooner, they're 2-0. October the 3rd at Iowa State. This is one that I did predict as well. I actually picked Iowa State to beat Oklahoma, and I am sticking with this one. This game is being played in Ames, Iowa. Oklahoma will have their work cut out for them in this game. Iowa State is a good football team. Let's not forget, just looking at the new updated rankings that we use here, our preseason aggregate poll, Iowa State is the number 14 team in the country on our poll. We're talking about number 5, Oklahoma today. Now, that's a little bit of a gap, but we're not talking about some unranked Joe Schmo little league team here or anything like that. Iowa State is a really good football team. They're at home in this game, which I think still matters regardless of limited fan attendance. Um, Iowa State is going to be capable of putting up a lot of points. Long story short, Oklahoma does have a better defense than most Big 12 teams, so they're better equipped to go on the road and play a high-powered offense like that of the Cyclones. But I just really have a gut feeling. Oklahoma tends to lose one game in the regular season. I I don't think they're really going to be shocked by anything that Texas is going to do this year. So I'm finding that regular season loss at Iowa State. October 10th. I kind of just mentioned it and teased it a little bit. The Red River Shootout against Texas. This game is still being played on neutral site action in Dallas, Texas, which is pretty interesting given the circumstances of the current year. I guess there are financial contracts at play and things like that, much like you see Georgia and Florida still playing in Jacksonville this year, despite no fans likely to attend, or at least very limited fans. So this Texas game, very interesting. Just taking a look at the matchup here, because Texas, of course, is a great team as well. Texas checked in at number 11 on our preseason poll. The Longhorns are a good football team. They're not a great football team by the measure that Oklahoma has set. They, of course, are capable of catching the Sooners on an off day and winning. But given the fact that I have Oklahoma already losing at Iowa State, I think from this game on, they will play with a chip on their shoulder. And I really think that Iowa State game might be an instance of catching a young, inexperienced quarterback, making some plays on defense that are kind of unexpected, forcing some mistakes from Spencer Rattler. I think he grows from that loss. And I think moving forward, if you get Oklahoma later in the season, you're going to have a lot more trouble on your hands than if you play them earlier in the season. So I do think Oklahoma beats Texas, and I actually think they have a chance to win by a couple of scores here. I think they have a chance to use this as a bounce back statement game to say, hey, we are still here to play for a national championship. October the 24th at TCU. Again, this game's no easy win or anything like that. Texas Christian, of course, is a decent, respectable football team. I just don't see it happening for the Horned Frogs on that day. Without getting too into the details there, the talent disparity is just pretty large here. Again, TCU not a bad football team. After the Texas game, Oklahoma gets a bye week, so they're not going to have that post big game hangover. Regardless of the outcome there, they're going to come in refreshed after a bye week and I think win one on the road in Fort Worth. We move on to Halloween at Texas Tech. Texas Tech, simply put, the next couple of games are going to be the same story on here. Texas Tech is not one of the better teams in the Big 12. They are one of the worst teams in the Big 12. They would be the worst if it weren't for Kansas. And for that reason, I think this is an easy road win, about as easy of a Power 5 conference road win as you will find this year. This is definitely a W for the Sooners. November 7th versus Kansas. I just mentioned them. Kansas is terrible. I really don't know what to expect. I say it every time I bring up Kansas on this podcast. I don't know what to make of Les Miles. It's the same thing every time. You see some news clippings coming out the other day about how I'm going to let the coordinators coordinate. They're here for a reason. I'm not here to hold anyone back. I don't have preconceived notions about the offense or defense or what it should be. I just let my coordinators do the work. It's all the exact same things that he was saying in his time at LSU that never were actually true. So really, you take that with a grain of salt. It's going to be more of the same probably from Kansas. They're going to be real bad. They don't have really any seriously talented positions on their entire football team. They have a head coach who refuses to adapt. They just don't really have much going for them. Oklahoma, on the other hand, is a multi-time college football playoff contender and multi-time running Big 12 champion. They will get the win here against the Jayhawks. November the 21st, following another bye week, this is versus Oklahoma State. The Pokes, we just talked about a couple of episodes ago. Let's see, Oklahoma actually checked in one slot above Texas at number 10. So another great team out of the Big 12. There's the top tier in the Big 12. I think the top 2 or 3 teams are getting a little closer to Oklahoma and maybe catching up to them. But I don't think that this is a game that Oklahoma State is going to be able to win. It's in Norman, so I like the slight home field advantage there, even though they are in the same state, of course, for the Sooners in this game. And quite frankly, I just don't believe Oklahoma State is quite as good as everyone thinks they are. If we go back to a few episodes ago and look at my predictions there, I predicted OK State to go 7-3. I actually had them losing to Oklahoma, Baylor, and TCU. 3 good teams. TCU, the weakest of the 3, probably. But Oklahoma State is going to be a good team. They're going to be a really good team. Definitely a top 25 team. I don't know if they're top 10 like they are in the preseason here. I think there's a little bit too much hype behind this Cowboys team. So I like the Sooners to roll against their in-state rivals. November the 28th at West Virginia. I won't spend too much time on this one, West Virginia. I voiced my opinion before on this podcast when we talked about other Big 12 teams. They're just not anything really to call home about. They're not a bad football team, kind of maybe 1 or 2 teams below that TCU level. I don't think they're as good as someone like TCU. They're definitely not as good as Baylor or Oklahoma State or Texas or Oklahoma, but but they're not terrible, I guess. Oklahoma, though, even on the road here, they're going to put up a ton of points on West Virginia. I mean, they could drop 50 or 60 here, and I wouldn't bat an eyelash. That is going to be an Oklahoma win. So they come into their regular season finale with, I think, just one loss from early in the season at Iowa State. December 5th, they play Baylor. They played two great games against Baylor last year, both in the regular season and in the Big 12 championship game. Baylor is a team that I have been adamant people are sleeping on too much this season. They are outside of the top 25 despite making it all the way to the Sugar Bowl last year. I understand they have some talent to replace. I understand they have a new head coach with Matt Rule moving on to be the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, of course, in the NFL. Um, but this is still a really good Baylor football team. They're going to come on the road to Norman, regardless of what's happened in the season to this point. They're going to come on the road into this game, and they are going to be, have a chip on their shoulder coming into this game. I think they're going to play every bit as hard as they did last year against Oklahoma in either of those two games, but I just don't think the talent is quite where it was from Baylor last year. Whereas Oklahoma, it's probably pretty much about the same to me. It's more or less a wash with the talent they're replacing. Maybe they take a half baby step back is what Oklahoma does. Baylor probably takes a whole step back, but still a very good football team. I don't expect this to be a blowout or anything like that, but I do have Oklahoma winning to close out the regular season. So, as I mentioned, we'll get into a specific conference championship prediction special, but just anecdotally, just kind of reviewing the notes that I'm looking at off the top of my head and trying to do some head math. I don't think it's too complicated to figure out that based on what I have, because the Big 12 doesn't have divisions, they're pretty easy to figure it out. This is our last Big 12 team on the countdown, Oklahoma at number 5. So I am saying that Oklahoma and Texas will play in the Big 12 championship game. And that could get interesting with the fact that what I like about the Big 12 championship game is it's hard to beat a great team twice in a season, right? It's hard to beat a good team even twice in a season. And if Oklahoma beats Texas in that regular season matchup, it's very conceivable that they could drop that game to Texas in the Big 12 championship, in which case maybe the Big 12 plays its way right out of the college football playoff, even in this weird year where we have less teams to choose from. Honestly, I have no idea what the college football playoff is going to look like currently. But yeah, for now we're saying Oklahoma 9-1 on the regular season in 2020 and headed to the Big 12 championship game once again. Big surprise there. Now, will they win that game? We'll get into that. We'll get into that when we do our conference championship prediction special. We'll tie in the college football playoff predictions into that episode as well. For those of you joining live on twitch.tv/robotbraineater, again, if you want to drop any predictions for anyone in college football, but especially for Oklahoma, go ahead and drop those in. We're happy to have you join in the conversation live when the podcast posts on podcast services around the world a little later today. For everyone else listening on Apple Podcasts, please do subscribe to us on there. For those on Spotify, please give us a follow on there. And if you can, on your podcast service of choice, leave us that 5-star review. Helps us out tremendously to get more eyeballs and more ears on the podcast. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, we'll be taking a day off. So tomorrow, just a short break as we continue our march toward the beginning of the college football season. And then Thursday, just make sure that's the right. Yeah, Thursday, we'll be back talking about number 4 in the country for the 2020 season. We'll plow straight through Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday with 4, 3, 2, and 1. Then probably another day off in there before we do our conference championship and college football playoff predictions. At that point, we'll start transitioning right into our regular cadence for the regular season, which will be 2 episodes per week, where we'll get kind of one episode previewing all the games coming for the week, at least for the most part, depending on how many days of the week are occupied by games in that given week. And then one episode later on in the week reviewing what happened the week prior. So essentially, that's what we'll get into as we continue to march our way, like I said, toward the college football season, which, by the way, is now in single digits, kicking off in just 9 days. Thursday, September the 3rd, the first day this year of college football. So that's pretty exciting stuff. And of course, for college football news, previews, top 25 in the preseason predictions, and all, you are already tuned into the right place. If you do want to follow us on Twitter and see the content we put on there as well, give us a follow at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter. In the meantime and between time, thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you right here tomorrow.